people that haven't been able to get through. As I've asked for muting, please make sure you remain on mute whilst we're delivering the sessions. And questions, if you can put them into the Q&A, we will make every effort to answer those during the session, but we have got a Q&A at the end. So Mike, if you could go to the next slide, please. So we're going to talk about a number of things today. The first thing is why moving communities? What's the value, what's the benefit and the features of the product? We're going to give you a quick update on the number of people that have updated their information, but also the actual information that we're starting to see come through from a participation and finance point of view, through the customer experience survey that we're doing and the service delivery elements, and also the social value calculator, a really important part of this piece. We'll give you a really interesting demo of the dashboard, and there's some really interesting stuff around mapping that really floats my boat when it comes to looking at localities that we'll go through later. We're going to talk about how we can turn this brilliant data and insight into action so that you can really make the most of what you're hearing and what you're seeing. And then we'll run a Q&A session at the end. Mike, if you go to the next slide, please. We just wanted to remind you all of the breadth of the partnership involved in this Moving Communities platform. Leisurenet obviously doing our element. We then have 4Global with Data Hub, Max Associates supporting us from a consultancy point of view, but also from a real insight point of view from what's happening with operators and local authorities at the moment. Sheffield Hallam supporting the social value activity, and then of course Right Directions using Quest Prime as part of the quality element of the work that we're now seeing. Mike, if you could move to the next slide for me, please. We felt it was really important to start trying to identify what the features and benefits of the whole insight element was. And you can see here a table that tries to list where we think those benefits are for local authorities, for operators, and of course for Sport England from an England point of view. And from a point of view of local authorities, there's a real opportunity here to get some real data and insight and to be able to share these things. So you can share performance much easier with your teams, with your cabinets, with your portfolio holders, etc., and provide some really strong data and insight as to what's currently being delivered within your sites. That also allows operators, of course, to do the same piece. And we have had a number of operators who are now talking about using the data and the insight that's created on a monthly basis as part of their reporting process. And that, of course, links to influencing from a national point of view, from Sport England, across England, around what is actually happening and how can we do things differently. But looking at investment opportunities, how that influences localities, and of course, working collaboratively with those partners. So Sport England looking at working with NGBs, with active partnerships, etc., to really understand what's going on in localities. And that links back really to demonstrating how service contributes to local communities. The social value piece will give us some real insight around the indices of multiple deprivation. The customer experience survey is giving us some insight as to who is returning and who isn't returning. And this will really help to provide officers of the council with key data to make cases for investment, but also will allow our operators to compare performance across contracts, which gives the ability to start benchmarking, to start understanding where are the good things happening and who's doing what and how are they doing that, so that we can share insight across the country to allow people to all improve and learn from other people's mistakes. And the benchmarking side is really important, and we will share as part of the presentation who has access to what benchmarks and what comparators. So that's my piece over. So I think I'm moving to Utku on the next slide.
Thank you very much, Dave. Hi, everyone. Before we dive into what we have gathered so far from this good data and insights, we would like to update you just on where we are with the project and just remind you all the different data sources that provide data into this platform. So first of all, if we start with the operating model, there are 4 key data sets that are coming into this platform. And these are the participation data that comes in an automated way from the leisure management systems, the income and expenditure data, which is coming from the finance systems of the operators, and now about 60 to 70% of that is automated as well. Then the customer experience data that's coming from the user surveys that's started being circulated about 2 weeks ago. And then finally, the facility management service delivery data that's coming from Quest Prime assessments. All of this data goes into the Moving Communities database, where it's cleansed, aggregated, and fed into 6 key dashboards that we have created in the Moving Communities platform. And these dashboards are the participants dashboard that look at the unique individuals who participate, the visits dashboard, which is about throughput in the facilities, social value dashboard, finance dashboard with income and expenditure KPIs, customer experience dashboard about satisfaction of the customers and confidence to go back to the facilities, and then the service delivery dashboard that's fed by the Quest Prime assessments. And we have 3 user levels in the platform, which are the national level users, Sport England and the partners. Then we have the local authority and operators, which we will discuss further in the later stages of this presentation. So where we are with the project, if we can go to the next slide, please, Mike. We have launched the platform back in March 21, and after the launch, the first month of the platform has been all about collecting data. So thanks to your great efforts through operators and local authorities, we have now gathered substantial amount of data in the platform. And as of this week, we are now ready to open the dashboards and analysis sections of the platform. In terms of the numbers, we are at 804 sites as of this morning in terms of having submitted their data and having their data checks completed for finance. Then for participation, we have about 1,061 sites submitted and got their data checked. So both of these numbers will exceed 1,100 with the additional few in-house operators sending their data, and also the data checks being completed over the next 1 to 2 weeks before the end of the month. In terms of user surveys, we have reached about 29,000 and moving very fast, over 30,000 hopefully today. A lot of operators have already started and going on with their surveys, and we have another 2 weeks left in the user surveys to add to the total mix. And we have started with the Quest Prime assessments as well. We have so far 17 assessments completed, and there are a further 30 plus assessments to be completed this month and next to reach 48 assessments in total. If we can go to the next slide, please, Mark. So now what we would like to do is to share with you some of the insights that have started to be generated in the platform through the collection of this sector level data. Obviously, as operators and local authorities, you have the ability to filter the information to view your site-specific, local authority-specific, or operator-specific views from this data set. But today, at first, we would like to share with you some of the key findings and how we can use the platform to generate sector-level insight through the aggregated data. So we'll go through the 6 different dashboards as we walk through the presentation. So the first one is the participants and throughput dashboards. On the participants dashboard, what we have done is we have set our 2 filters to cover the full period before 1 year before the pandemic started. So this is April 20 to March 21, a full financial year. And then compared with the previous financial year, April 19 to March 20, which is named as National 2020 picture in here. When we say national, we are referring to England, by the way, because this is primarily a Sport England project. So we are not covering the home countries yet, but there are conversations with the home countries as well to extend the project to the other nations too. So some of the findings that you can see on the screen in terms of total participants figures. So before March 2020, we have about 20 million unique individuals feeding data into the platform in terms of their activity levels. And in the post-pandemic period, this is about 3.6 million. So you can see the impact of COVID-19 on the sector in terms of the total participation numbers in the leisure facilities. That same reflection is done also on female 65 plus and low stake participants. So there are significantly lower numbers, like 15% or so compared to pre-lockdown period before April 2020. The second part of the dashboard is giving you the information about the age group and deprivation breakdowns of those participants. So what we are seeing in here is on the right-hand side with the light blue bars on the graphs, there has been a more equal distribution of different age groups in the pre-lockdown period. But if we look at the post-lockdown period, especially the 55 plus age group segments have declined in terms of their representation levels in leisure centers. So, and what we are seeing is an increase between 16 to 34-year-old age groups, which is pretty much the same picture that we are seeing after the last lockdown in the past 3 to 4 weeks in the leisure center usage. On the right-hand side, when we look at the deprivation analysis, what we are seeing is again, better distribution of the deprivation layers in the pre-lockdown period, although we have a higher proportion of participants in the 8 to 10, the less deprived areas. After the pandemic, what we are seeing is that differences has even increased more. So we have basically even a higher representation of the 8 to 10 IMD categories, which are the less deprived areas. But if we look at the higher deprivation areas, so IMD 1 to 3, the participation levels have decreased even more. So the representation is even less representative of the whole IMD levels. So how does it reflect on the overall throughput numbers? So if we can go to the next slide, please. So in here, what we are seeing is the total participation figures in terms of the throughput numbers on the top two graphs, which is broken down by month. So what we can see is over 120 million visits recorded in the pre-lockdown period. But in the post-lockdown 1 year, what we are seeing is we are barely reaching the 25 million figures in the whole of the year. The second graph, the bottom graph on the screen, is showing the distribution of the activities. So how that total participation is broken down into different activity groups. Again, in the pre-lockdown period, we have a better distribution of activities between group workout, fitness, swimming lessons, sports hall activities, and outdoor. But if we look at the post-lockdown period, what we are seeing is the primary usage has been on the fitness activities, and due to restriction, there has been a much lower numbers on sports hall activities, and also there's been a decline on the swimming activities and lessons as well. Obviously, all of this data is being regularly updated with the new information coming in, so we will be able to share some results from the latest lockdown, post-lockdown period as soon as the new month data is fed into the platform. So other than participation data, if we can go to the next slide, please, Mike, we have some information about the finance KPIs. So for the ones who are familiar with the national benchmarking service from before, these are the KPIs used in a standard way across the last 10 years, probably in the sector, from income per visit to operating cost and subsidy per visit. So the picture we are seeing here is the income per visit has been going up due to less people visiting with the income levels. However, there's been also a significant increase in terms of operating cost per visit, which is reflected in the subsidy figures. Obviously, the subsidy figures here is the positive figure reflects a subsidy and the negative figure reflects a surplus. So again, in the post-COVID period, what we are seeing is a heavily subsidized service due to the lack of income coming in, but the cost pretty much staying the same in most areas as long as the centers are open. And also from a cost recovery perspective, what we are seeing in the post-lockdown period is like a subsidy-based service again in there, with the numbers being below 100% between operating income and cost compared. The second part of the screen is also quite interesting. So this is showing us the breakdown of the income and expenditure items, income items in different areas of operations inside the facility. And what's really interesting in here is in the pre-lockdown period, there has been a better distribution between health and fitness, swimming, and like activity-based income. However, if we look at the post-lockdown period, the majority of the income goes into the other income box, which is reflecting the repurposing of the centers for other use in the local authorities and less income coming from activity-based operations. And on the right-hand side, if we look at the expenditure, this reflects what we just discussed on the top part. To be honest, the costs have stayed pretty much the same as long as the centers have been open. So that reflects the subsidy scenario, so the requirement for additional support to cover the fixed cost of running those facilities. The utilities costs have gone up as well as a percentage in there, again, as a reflection of keeping the centers open even when there was no operation or not high number of participants coming in. So these are, as we call them, the hard KPIs, so KPIs that are fed by participation and finance figures. Now I'll switch over to Mike and Caroline to talk about customer experience and service delivery KPIs.
Thanks, Utku. So in terms of the customer experience, as you've already seen, we've had a good response so far. We've got over 29,000 responses to date. Utku mentioned about an extension to the timeline for the survey. Just to clarify on that we will be going out tomorrow with news that we are going to put a 2-week extension on. A lot of operators some operators have struggled to get the emails out in numbers at the pace that we've requested. So rather than cut it short and achieve less response, we're going to be granted a 2-week extension from Sunday, but that will be confirmed tomorrow in an email. But we're still really pleased with the response to date. And in terms of the dashboard for the customer experience, you can see that we've chosen 4 key indicators from the questionnaire. There's about 14 questions in the total questionnaire, but the 4 key ones that we've selected from left to right are cleanliness of activity areas, cleanliness of changing areas, the confidence indicator, and NPS. So first of all, cleanliness of activity areas. We're scoring an average score there of 88.27 so far. Now, that question is exactly the same in exactly the same format as we used to ask with MBS. So what we can do is compare that with previous year's results, and it is actually a significantly higher score than we saw pre-COVID. So that's really pleasing. The way we work out that percentage, by the way, is it's a 5-point scale, and we just work out what the average score would be on that 5-point scale, and then display that as a percentage. Obviously, we don't have any comparative figures in there for 2020. Similarly, with cleanliness of changing areas, we're cognizant of the fact that wet side changing areas perhaps haven't been used as much as they were pre-COVID. So this figure may reflect that, but we're still really pleased with that score of 85.58%, and again higher. So satisfaction with both these areas in terms of cleanliness is higher than it was pre-COVID. We've then got a new score. Some of you may not be familiar with it. So this is the confidence indicator that we developed over the last year. And it's a new question which asks people how confident, comfortable they felt during their last visit in relation to COVID-19 protocols. And the way we work out this is a 10-point scale, 0 to 10, very similar to the same as NPS. But we then work out the indicator, the score for confidence, by taking the 9 and 10s and detracting the 0 to 6 scores. So it's a really tough matrix. It's important to bear this in mind, because if you compare that 59% across to the 85%, it looks like people are less confident about return than they are happy with the satisfaction of the change areas. That's not the case. Now, this is a tough matrix. It's a new one. We have got some comparators though. So we did ask this on several occasions to large samples nationally across the sector during in between the lockdowns that have occurred, and this is a few percentage higher than we've seen before. So again, it's an indicator that confidence levels in returning are reasonably high and are higher than when people came back between previous lockdowns. And then finally, we've got NPS, which I'm sure most of you are familiar with now, Net Promoter Score. So again, this is worked out 10-point scale. How likely would you be to recommend? With 0 being not at all and 10 being extremely highly. We then take the promoters, the percentage of people scoring 9 to 10 promoters, take away the detractors, who are the 0 to 6ers. We end up with an NPS at the moment of 51.29%. So most of you probably have got an idea of where we typically sit in the sector. From our experience over the years, most sites and most national scores have sat between 40 and 50%. You know, with occasionally operators and sites will get up as high as 60, 70. Sometimes they'll go down as low as -10, -20. So I think this is a really encouraging NPS I've taken over these last few weeks to be achieving you know, an above average score for the sector at 51% is really good. And when you go into the dashboard, the customer dashboard, you'll see all of the questions, all 14 questions displayed, how you can see question 1 here. So question 1 here is the age question, but for each of the subsequent questions, you'll be able to see the responses in terms of numbers, percentages, and then a graphical display, which you can print out or export into your own reports. I wanted to have that age one up there in particular, though, because we've had a look at the sorts of people, the types of people that have completed the survey, and we've noticed 2 things straight away, that we've got a high percentage of people in the older age groups completing the survey than who are returning. And equally, we have a high percentage of females completing the survey than who are returning. So when we compare the profile of the survey respondents to the profile of the participant data, which we could talk about earlier, the survey is definitely skewed towards older age groups and towards females. So when we're looking at the data from the survey, we just need to bear that in mind. Now that may change over the next couple of weeks as different sorts of customers, you know, come back with the expansion of the opening regime. I just wanted to share a couple of other stats as well. We've got a section within those 14 questions. We've got 2 sections towards the end, which are much more qualitative type questions. One of which is around future intentions, and the other one is around the impact of your local leisure centre. And we're getting some really important and interesting stats coming out of that. So, for example, 97% of respondents stated that they intend to exercise at least once a week over the next 6 months using their local leisure centre, and 84% said they preferred exercising in the local leisure centre environment, and they exercise more intensely than they did in informal sessions. So those sets of questions are absolutely key to proving, to making the case for the importance of the local leisure centre in community activity levels. Okay, so that's the customer experience survey. I'm going to put a name. If anyone's still struggling a little bit with the survey and wants some help, I'm going to put the name and email address of Sarah Forster, who's leading on this from our point of view, in the chat box now. Please drop her an email if you've got any questions about the survey, because as I say, we are going to confirm a 2-week extension to this. So if you haven't sent out your reminder yet, if you haven't sent out your first email yet, then please contact us if you need any help or advice. Okay, I'm going to hand over to Caroline now to talk about Quest Prime.
Good morning. Fantastic results from the survey so far. I haven't had my survey yet from my local leisure centre, so hopefully I'll get that soon, because I will be back in as soon as I can on Monday. In terms of Quest Prime, the assessments are starting to build up now, which is fantastic. We've got a very busy June and beginning of July. For those people who have got assessments awarded through the funding, please make sure all application forms in are as soon as possible so that we can hit the deadline that we've got, which is to have all assessments completed by the 5th of July. So from a Quest Prime point of view, as you know, there are 7 modules. We've pulled out key modules that obviously affect participation and moving forward, and those are cleaning and hygiene and customer journey. And they do link quite closely with the customer survey, which is fantastic. And we have found that our Quest results so far do reflect the scores that we're getting in the Quest Prime assessments. So far, the results don't look particularly exciting in that there are no ups and downs, but we do have some fantastic results in that generally across the board, everybody that we've assessed so far is scoring very good across all the modules, both MV and assessment. So that's fantastic news. And these scores are higher than they were when we launched Quest last year, so Quest Prime last year. So that's all good news. So far, I think there's about 18 on there that have been conducted in the last few weeks, but hopefully the numbers well, they are definitely going to increase over the next couple of months, and we will see those scores hopefully stay at very good, or if not, go into excellent. So thank you ever so much for that. Over to Mike or Atko.
Thank you, Caroline. I'll pick that up. And thank you, Mike, for the presentation of the two dashboards. So the last dashboard, which is our social value dashboard, is marked as coming soon. The reason being this dashboard is connected to the social value calculator from the Data Hub, and that's being updated this month with the latest research coming from Sheffield Hallam University and their publication for Sport England just before the New Year. So what's changing in the model? So Sheffield Hallam does regular updates of the research with new available data, and also publish that via the social value calculator. So in the sense of the updates, one of the most important parts of that is addition of new variables on the health conditions. We have hip fracture, back pain, and risk of injury being added to the improved health variables. And on the subjective well-being, we have also the improved social capital to communities is being added as a new variable in there. The other update is this time the model will be based on duration of activity rather than the number of visits. And that's again a major upgrade from the previous version, because there was a certain threshold you have to hit in order to generate social value, any social value, which were leaving out all the people who don't hit that threshold. However, right now with this update, we are able to cover people that are grouped as fairly active participants, so people who are hitting 30 to 149 minutes of physical activity on a weekly basis. So the model is more inclusive and also capturing a wider audience from leisure center users. And also this granularity is reflected on the mosaic profiling as well. So the socioeconomic profiling of the participants have been extended to duration-based modeling as well. So that will give us better granularity and also more inclusive model in the platform. We have also reflected some of the deflators into the new calculations. So we are now balancing out the inside and outside facility activity. So not just looking at what people do inside the facility, but also applying a proportion of this based on our data from the previous years of National Benchmarking Service and Data Hub in calculating the inside-outside facility use, and also taking into account people who use multiple facilities from the operator within the same month. So the model will provide us a more granular, more inclusive picture of the social value from the sector. And right now the team is working on that update, and we are hoping to release that dashboard in the new month as well. Thank you, Mike. If we can go to the next slide, please. So before we go into the platform and share some screens with you directly from the platform, I'd like to share an important part of this project has been about how you access the platform and the different user levels. That's important for two reasons. One of them is to give the reassurance to the operators and local authorities how their data and anonymity is preserved in the platform, and also how everyone is making use of the aggregated data through the benchmarks. So we have three main groups of users in the platform. So if I start from the right-hand side, we have the national view, which is the Sport England view, which doesn't go into any level of detail in the sense of the individual sites, but it's just accessing the aggregated data at the national level. Then we have the local authority view, which can drill down to the sites they own and also see the different operators running their own leisure centers, but just within the boundaries of their local authority. So they can never see data from another local authority or identify any other local authority's data. And then finally, we have the service delivery partner level, which is the operator level. And we have some sub-user levels within the operators. So we have the executive level, who can access all information at the operator level and drill down into contracts and sites. We have the contract manager level, who can see the sites within their contract, but cannot go and see other contracts within the operator. And then we have the leisure center level, which is basically the general manager, who can see their own data from their site, but they cannot go into other sites of the same operator even. So all of these user levels have been generated with the idea of securing the data and allowing only the people who are relevant to that specific site-specific data to access this information. On the other side of this, which is the second part of the table, we want everyone to benefit from the aggregated data in an anonymized way. So with that thinking, all user levels have access to national data at the aggregated level, so they can see how the national stats compared to their own stats, and also they can filter the national data by management type, so they can drill down into trust, commercial management, or in-house levels of information at the aggregated level. Just for local authorities, there is an extra layer of filtering that can be done. So through our partnership with LGA on this one, we are using SIPFA statistical neighbors in order to show the local authorities in an aggregated way, benchmarks from the 15 statistical neighbors to that local authority. So this is criteria used by local authorities wider than the Moving Communities platform. So they will be able to make use of that more relevant benchmarks for their user level as well. We have had already discussions with Sport England and operators to generate more bespoke like benchmarks in the future as the data set in the platform grows. So we will be able to generate like more targeted benchmarks for the different type of operators and leisure centers, but that's more in the roadmap of the Moving Communities in future months. Thank you, Mike. If we can go to the next slide. So here I'm going to jump into the platform and share with you some of the screens and how these user levels can be used within the platform to filter the information relevant to your user level. So I'll just try to share my screen now. Hopefully you can all see my filter screen. I can see some notes, so it should be on the right page. So each operator has access to the system, and each local authority has access to the system. And from the data collection period, you will be familiar with the site list that you've been seeing before. Now, in addition to your site list, you will have access to this dashboard section where you will have 6 different dashboards, the filter section and the summary dashboard as your available options. That will be opened in all accounts starting from tomorrow, and next week onwards you will be able to access all of this data. What the platform allows you to do is, through the use of this filtering section, to filter the information to a specific site or to a specific local authority and operator based on your user levels. In the filtering page, we have 2 filters that's available for everyone to choose from. On the left-hand side, you have your local filter. So currently I'm in the platform through my demo operator, so I can filter to a single leisure center, or within the operator, I can choose multiple leisure centers as well. I also have a time filter. So currently I've selected the period from April 20 to March 21, but you can change this to be a single month, to be 6 months, so you can adjust your filter according to your preferences. On the right-hand side, you have your benchmark filter, which is basically giving you the benchmarks from national to management-based type of filtering. And again, you can adjust your time filters to be relevant to you. You don't need to choose the same time filter. So what you can do is, for example, you can compare one site's data from 1 year to another year. So you can do longitudinal analysis, or you can choose the same time period and compare 2 of your sites or 1 site against national benchmarks. So how does it reflect into your dashboards? I'll start with the summary dashboard. So on your summary dashboard, you will see the information about your selection first, the local authority, operator, leisure center name, and the time period. And then you will see one KPI from each of the dashboards filtered in your summary dashboard. So here I have the total participants, year-on-year change, subsidy per visit, social value per person, confidence indicator, and Quest overall results. So here I can see the single benchmark, so my demo site against the national results for the same time period. And all of these boxes are clickable. So if I click on this box, it takes me to my participants dashboard, which you've seen the screenshot before. So I can see my total participant figures compared with the national figures. Obviously, not every single KPI will be relevant for the type of benchmarking you would like to do. So if you are comparing your single site against national benchmarks, then the actual figures might be less representative, but then you can make better use of the percentage-based benchmarks. So for example, I can see how my gender distribution in my demo site compares to the national gender distribution in the leisure centers, and where I'm seeing a higher representation of female participants compared to the national figures during the lockdown period. And likewise, if I look at the age group-based comparisons, what I can figure out is a higher representation of the younger age groups, and compared to the 16 to 54-year-olds being underrepresented compared to the sector. Again, depending on your filtering options, you can make this within your local authority or within your operator a more relevant benchmark for your criteria. And likewise, you can see the same for throughput dashboard, finance, and all the other dashboards we've seen before. Currently in the customer experience one, I wouldn't see any data in here because of my selected filters being April to March. So if I update that filter to be April, May this year, then I will be able to see all of the data feeding into these dashboards as well. There is a special case with the service delivery dashboard worth mentioning, because we don't do service Quest Prime assessment multiple times within the year. The time filter is not applied onto this dashboard, so you are able to actually see the data irrespective of what your time selection is in your filtering. You will always see those benchmarking available to you in that dashboard, depending on your selection on a single site or national. So the one that I've selected in here is the demo site versus the national picture. So it's giving me the picture from the last 12 months. So all of these dashboards are available as of tomorrow, and as I mentioned, social value will be available as of end of the month. But there is also a separate section in the platform that's available to you, which is the mapping section that Dave was referring to earlier in the presentation. So each user has access to this map depending on their user level. Currently, I'm at the national one, so I can see all sites in the country. But if I'm a local authority, I would be able to get that picture only from the leisure centers that are available in my local authority. So I'll just focus on a single local authority in here. So this heat map is generated through the distribution of your participation data into the local authorities. So I can see all the different areas that my participants are coming from, and I can also add the ward boundaries to actually filter the data to understand where from the surrounding wards my participants are coming from. I can use this data to analyze actually how I'm converting people, or I'm bringing people into my leisure centers from high deprivation areas. So by selecting the 20% deprivation decile, what I can see is areas around my facility where I'm bringing in people from these high deprivation areas, and I can identify wards where I have an underrepresentation of these age groups because of the lighter colors in demand figures. You don't need to use this just from a reporting purposes, but this tool is also quite useful in order to do some planning, from some future planning. So for example, if you are a local authority and operator working together in order to address like an increase in participation layers from older adults, what you can do in here is you can make use of the context layers that are built into the platform. So you can select, for example, population age 60 plus, and add a context layer to your map, where you can see all the areas around your facilities where you have a higher proportion of 60 plus age group, and you can put a targeted intervention in place for those areas where you have a higher representation. Or likewise, if your priority is more of targeting obesity in children, then you can add obesity layer for reception level children around your facilities, and you can identify areas with a higher risk of this obesity problem and put an intervention in place. So this, from a place-based approach perspective, is quite a useful tool to help you to plan your interventions and also to measure the impact of these interventions in an ongoing way. So these are, I mean, I'm already seeing a couple of questions in the chat, which I'm happy to pick up after Mike's session on the next steps. And once we discuss that, then I'll be able to pick up all the questions that are raised in the channel regarding to the sections you have seen so far. So with that in mind, I'll now switch over to Mike for the presentation and discussing the next steps.
Thanks, Utku. I think when you get to that map section, it's always particularly impressive. There's nothing like a nice, colourful map to excite data people, is there? So just to sum up now, really, I mean, this is, for me, this is what moving communities is all about. We've got to keep the big picture in mind. We know it's been quite hard work to get the data in and to get the email invites out for the surveys, but hopefully you can start to see the sort of really valuable data that we're starting to collect, and it's all about turning that now into intelligence and an actual insight. And I guess the three big questions which we're going to be able to answer over the coming weeks and months is, number one, are leisure centres being used in recovery mode by who we expect? And already you can see just from those initial few weeks that we've got some issues and things that we need to look at in terms of older people coming back much slower, people from lower, the low seg groups coming back at a slower rate as well. If that continues, then it's really important to know that and hopefully put in some intervention, take some actions. Secondly, around the finances, is the financial recovery matching projections? There's been various projections put out there, some more positive, some much more pessimistic. It's really important in terms of talking to government and any potential future funding to know where we are at and how much we're down on pre-COVID position and what's the likely rate of return to that pre-COVID position. And then finally, which particular activities and facility areas are recovering the best. Obviously, Group X is soon to open. We'll start having a much better picture of the overall look of things in terms of that mix of facilities and participation. And again, if we understand that the recovery of certain activities and facilities is much slower than others, then we're able to do things both at a site, contract and potentially nationally to address that. And I guess the big one is using all of this evidence information to determine future delivery, both at a local level, but as I said before, it's going to be incredibly important to make the case in order talking to government and any potential future support. We've had NLRF1. We don't know if any further funding is going to be available, but having this sort of data and insights is going to be absolutely critical to any future funding that does become available. So thanks a lot for your support. I'm just going to hand back to Dave now for a summary.
Thanks, Mike. So we need to start by saying thank you to everybody who's uploaded information, who's joined Data Hub and had the information moved automatically, and for also all of those organisations that have distributed the survey for us. We've got a great number for the survey for an England picture. But if you're, as a site, only getting 9 or 10 responses, then there is going to be not a lot of insight that you can draw from your data. So we would ask that if you are quite light on the numbers that you've currently achieved, please can you nudge your customers to complete the survey for us? Because yes, great, we've got a picture for England, but it's really important that you get a picture for you and for your location and for your locality. So we've just got to keep going in pushing this data, getting it through so that we've got a real picture that we can understand, that we can start helping make decisions, so we can start informing all of the committees and the reviews that are currently happening about what is happening within public leisure centres within England. There's been some great questions actually coming through around benchmarking things, which I know Utku and Mike will pick up in a second. But the other thing that we'd ask is if you can help us to spread the results and insights, because it's really important that people know that this exists, because this does become a really strong piece of insight that organisations can use across the country to really make a difference to what happens in the future. And on the right hand side of this screen, you can see an infographic, which will be our weekly infographic, which we will put out on a Thursday. It'll go out 2 o'clock today. We will also email it out to all of the contact details we've got for operators and local authorities, so it lands in your email box. And we're going to add to this as having a bi-weekly report, which will have a look at different types of lenses at this report. So it'll look at disability or ethnicity or gender, etc., as we progress through. So you can see that information there. It will be also shared on our social media outlets, which we have posted in the chat box. If you want to follow those, then it will land effectively on a Thursday at 2 o'clock for the weekly one. So from that point of view, please just get in contact if you need anything further, if there's any questions. As I said, we are recording this and we will send it out as part of our social media piece. And that leaves us time with Mike, the next slide, which takes us to questions and answers. And if I may, Utku, can I come to you first with a couple that you've said you'll take? Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you, Dave, and thank you everyone for the questions. I mean, looking at them as Dave was speaking, they're all very relevant and good questions. Some of them I have the answers right now. Some of them are more ideas that are really valuable for us for future planning of the tool and how we develop it further. So I'll try to address all of them, but it's great to see how everybody is engaged and already thinking about the future steps as well. If I start with the first question from WS about the outside activities, whether they are from traditional facilities or broader community initiatives, the primary source of information being the leisure management systems, a majority of the outdoor activities have been coming from the ones that are run through the facilities, so outdoor programs like the outdoor football, outdoor tennis, or other type of activities that are happening within the leisure center environment, but more as outdoor activities. However, also operators started sharing data from their non-leisure management system captured data as well, programs that they are running in their communities, but still run by the same service providers. So the platform has the ability to store that type of information as well. And a couple of operators have already started doing so. So going forward, hopefully this will enable us to extend the data capture, not just at the leisure management system level, but wider through the data collection via other means. The second question was about mosaic profiling and whether we are able to share some more information about that one. Yes, so Experian is our partner in Social Value Calculator to use the mosaic profiling based on socioeconomic the profiles of individuals. So within the platform, you will have a guidance document that makes the reference to the mosaic profiles and how these are interpreted in the social value calculator. So you will be able to get further information on that. But if you have any other questions related to further level of detail, you can always contact us on the Data Hub support line, which we shared in the channel. There was the next question from Pepple K about the different benchmarking options and filtering options to make the benchmarks more relevant. So whether it is through the age of facilities, through different type of facilities or operators have, that's a very valid question, because we know the performance can be impacted by the age of the facility, by the size of the facility, and many other criteria. As I mentioned earlier, currently we are trying to build a national picture with some benchmarks based on the management types. And as the data set grows within the platform, we will be able to generate further benchmarks, whether it is supply or demand side based, so filtering options based on size of the facility, based on the facility mix in the facility. So these are all the future ideas that are already being considered and discussed within the moving communities team. So hopefully this will be reflected in the future iterations of the platform to make the benchmarks even more relevant, while respecting, of course, the sensitivities around the data. So the primary fundamental principle of the platform is there will never be an opportunity for anyone to identify any other operator's site or local authority's site. So within those boundaries, we will be able to apply further benchmarks. There was again another question about the differences between staffing costs from one trust to the other, from one local authority to the other. So how does it impact the results? I think a similar answer to that one is, first of all, there are percentage-based comparisons in the platform. So when it comes to, for example, distribution of the cost, the staffing cost can be seen as a percentage of the total rather than as an actual. So that might help with the more relevant benchmarks, not just based on the quantum, but also the distribution of the cost percentages, but also to make local authority benchmarks more relevant. You can make use of the SIPFA statistical neighbor benchmarking. So hopefully this should give you, as a local authority, more relevant benchmarks from a filtered version of the national picture rather than any local authority in the country. Another question came about comparing participants' information not just against another operator or local authority, but actually can we compare it against the local data? A very relevant question, and something we are also considering and in building into the platform. So this is basically where you can compare the demographic split within your local authority and the demographic profile of your participants. So this is again an idea that's already being considered within the roadmap of the development. So all of these ideas are being taken into account by our product teams and constantly being discussed with our moving communities stakeholders in order to develop the product further in the future months. I think I have covered everything that I could see related to the product in the chat box, but more than happy to pick up any further questions.
Excellent, thank you, Akku. Mike, I've got a question for you that's come through direct, and it's about the experience survey. It's just, what's the plans for future surveys? Is there any follow-up to what we've currently done?
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, there certainly is. So we've got a plan to complete a second national survey. It's either going to be in July, early July, before the summer holidays, or in September. Some of the questions from the first survey will be repeated, but we'll also be learning, obviously, what's worked, what hasn't worked, and there may be different priorities in terms of information that we need after places have been open for 3 or 4 months. So yeah, definitely July or September still to be confirmed, and we want to see how this one goes over the next couple of weeks following the announcement of the extension. And the other thing people who have looked at the survey themselves will be familiar with is that there is a question in there asking permission from people who give us their mobile number to carry out a short follow-up survey by SMS, by text. It'll only be 3 or 4 questions, but what that will allow us to do is to do some individual tracking, focusing on particular target groups, perhaps women, perhaps older people, perhaps low SEV groups, just asking them about their activity levels 1 month, 2 months, 3 months after that initial survey. So yes, definitely a program of follow-ups to happen, Dave.
Okay, excellent, thank you. There's no more questions that have come through. So we will not draw this out. We will say thank you very much. We had 166 participants over the session today. Please have a look at those accounts for both Twitter and LinkedIn, because we will be providing regular information and updates through that platform to keep you up to date and show you what we're doing. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time. Take care, and we will see you all soon. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.